I'm Kayla Pacheco, an MTA Vision Summer 2019 Corporate Social Responsibility Intern in MTA Vision's Leadership Development Program. My goals for this internship were to expand my research, analysis, and writing skills, as well as to be able to communicate my analysis to legislators and stakeholders. In this video, I will tell you more about the many assignments that helped me achieve these goals, highlights from distinguished guests in the field of corporate social responsibility and politics, as well as my top 3 takeaways from the internship, my next steps in my policy career, and who I would recommend the MTA Vision Corporate Social Responsibility and Government Relations internship to. And lastly, I will give a final quote and thank the people who have made this experience exceptional. Each week, I completed 1 to 3 impact briefs. An impact brief is a research paper of a public or private entity. And in that research paper, I would assess their use of CSR, and I would do this by thoroughly reading their annual report of sustainability or corporate social responsibility. I would then research other credible and reliable sources about the company. At that time, I would be able to learn if the company is presenting a true assessment of their use of CSR and what areas of implementation need to be improved. Finding out these additional sources made it so I could get a better grasp on how these companies are relating to their employees, their community, and their consumers. I would then write a detailed, concise research paper that would assess the use of the company's CSR and provide them with recommendations to improve the conditions of their stakeholders. I had the privilege of researching companies such as Walmart, Equifax, Wells Fargo, MVM, MTC, SunPower, Cora, Geo Group, Mohawk, Purdue Pharma, Beyond Green Sustainable Food Partners, Armstrong World Industries, Planned Parenthood, and more. By researching these companies, I was able to learn about helpful, innovative corporate solutions, such as Walmart's Red E system. They produced this to reduce global CO2 emissions. They realized that 90% of their emissions were coming from their supply chain. By creating this system and encouraging partners to get involved, they saw a decrease in emissions by 270,000 metric ton, and this is growing. They're also in the process of a 10-year plan to become a zero waste company. More and more companies are seeing the value of using CSR practices. A great example of this is Beyond Green Sustainable Food Partners. This is a food service and consulting company located in the Chicago area. The founder, Chef Greg Christian, created the philosophy Mindful Feeding, in which this involves creating zero waste kitchens, improving kitchen efficiency, cooking from scratch, and developing different recipes. He also wants to improve environmental practices and use third-party monitoring systems to ensure that corporations remain transparent and accountable for their actions and maintain high standards for products and services, as well as treat their staff and their communities with respect. They've gone above and beyond helping their community by collaborating with the Chicago school system. They planted 10 organic gardens in various schools and created a curriculum to teach children about healthy food in the classroom and in the cafeteria. SunPower is another company. They're a solar panel producer, and they have a light to land philosophy where they only use land if they can have it as a multi-purpose option. They also created an innovative robot that uses 75% less water to clean their solar panels. And this also creates a 15% increase in functionality of those solar panels. They've created a great program called 3S. This is an attempt to serve communities who have underserved energy needs. And they do this through a standard shipping container that is full of necessary supplies to build a solar panel, to charge that solar panel, and store it. They also are working with partners to make this program absolutely sustainable. Planned Parenthood also focuses on underserved communities by providing women with healthcare services. They also encourage human rights, reproductive rights, and education. They currently have 30 lawsuits that are pushing back on infringements to women's health, reproductive freedom, and education. Cora is a feminine hygiene company. They work to better conditions for girls and women around the world in the US, India, and Kenya. And they do this through partnerships and commitments. And they work to increase access for healthcare, reproductive freedom and rights, and access to sanitary pads. Every week, I completed a My Expert Opinion chat, also known as MIO chat. This is a research paper on current relevant topics in the areas of policy, politics, and corporate social responsibility. I completed 9 MIO chats, and the topics that I researched were the passage of the emergency humanitarian funding for the U.S. border, solar energy expanding in the state of Georgia, the U.S.-China trade deal, the U.S.-Canada-Mexico trade deal, White House communications etiquette, restorative justice, permanent funding for the authorizations funds for the 9/11 Victims Fund, and the inquiry of missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls in Canada. Part of the process for this assignment was to provide my personal professional opinion based off of the information that I collected. Research the views from the White House, House of Representatives, Senate, expert stakeholders of various backgrounds from the public sector and private sector, the Supreme Court, leaders of government agencies, and any additional relevant stakeholders from a primary, reliable source. I would then present the information in a concise and clear way to communicate all sides. It stood out to me how helpful it was to go ahead and research topics using primary information. When conducting my research on the U.S.-Canada-Mexico trade deal, I realized just how little information was provided to the public. I now have a firm understanding of all of these topics. And another topic that stood out to me was restorative justice. And all of the information I was able to look into, I saw that it provides a savings for the program, it reduces recidivism, and it creates real justice for the victims and their loved ones, while it also allows the perpetrator to take accountability for their actions and make amends to their victim, their community, and anyone that was affected through their actions. Each week, we completed trainings. They allowed me to gain more knowledge on the government structures, procedures, legislative voting practices, leadership, and staff roles. With these assignments, such as learning leaders and digging deeper, I was able to learn more about the specific leadership positions and members, and what their passions are, and what they may be interested in voting on and sponsoring. The White House priorities allowed me to see what the President will suggest legislators direct funding towards, as well as what Republicans in the House and Senate will attempt to move forward legislatively. I was able to watch a live Senate floor proceeding and a live House proceeding. This allowed me to learn what the daily operations look like for both. A bonus opportunity, let me listen in on a White House conference call. I was able to hear directly from an acting director how a recently passed bill was affecting his department. The assignments on the UN Sustainable Developmental Goals allowed me to learn the details of each goal and see the research behind them and why these goals were chosen. Weekly HR moments allowed me to gain additional professional growth and tools, such as using failure as a learning opportunity and active listening, the importance of communication in the work setting, and tips to have stronger communication with coworkers. Gamification was an assignment to have a hands-on approach to learn what is required to pass a law from the perspective of a legislator, an executive branch, the judiciary branch. For example, for the legislative branch, there was a need to build support with constituents through town halls and negotiation with legislative colleagues. I had the opportunities to relay my work to others through the use of social media. I was able to post sections of my research papers, and I had regular communication with my supervisors with one-on-one weekly meetings and weekly staff meetings to present my work in a clear and concise manner and receive feedback. I was able to receive feedback from both supervisors and my fellow interns. During these meetings, we were presented with the honor of WIM, which is a leadership opportunity given to you based on your exceptional work and leadership during the week. I received this honor twice, once by my supervisors and the second by my peers. This allowed me to set up and facilitate the weekly Friday intern meetings. I would also create a meeting agenda and encourage my fellow interns to keep going, work hard, and turn in all of their assignments on time. The welcome video assignment created an opportunity for me to improve my on-camera skills. It was a highlight that I received recognition for a phenomenal reenactment of a news reporter. During my weekly video briefs, I was able to grow in my experience in creating and editing a professional video. My Impact group project was a collaboration with my partner Joyce Asteris to add to CSR literature. The Impact tool was a collaboration to create and develop a measurement of CSR. We also expanded the definition of CSR along with adding additional guidelines. The original CSR definition was created in 2007 by Adonis. Corporate social responsibility, as Joyce and I defined it, is a long-term strategic framework based on humanitarian principles and integrated into operations of an organization that considers their impact on all stakeholders. Then they seek to generate positive returns for profit, people, and the environment. The humanitarian principles are based on the UN humanitarian principles of humanity, impartiality, independence, and neutrality. We also added a measurement tool to assess the use of CSR through a series of questions that help determine a CSR score between 1 and 5. The questions are: to what extent does the organization reference their triple bottom line? Do they have positive returns for people, profit, and the planet? Who are their stakeholders? Are they considering the issues that are important to their stakeholders or to themselves? Are they leaving out any voices? Are they socially responsible for the conditions of their employees? What is their impact on all of their stakeholders, such as employees, owners, stockholders, members of the community? Do they engage in long-term commitment? Are they accountable for their actions, whether they're good or bad? Do they measure and track their level of responsibility through things such as reports, documents, websites? Do they have a plan to improve conditions for their stakeholders? Or do they engage in greenwashing, which is a way to utilize PR stunts to trick the community into thinking that you're doing good things, but you're really not stepping up to make those changes to demonstrate corporate social responsibility? To measure humanity, we ask, how do they help their community when there is need? To measure neutrality, we ask, do they take sides during hostilities or conflicts in the community? To measure impartiality, we ask, do they help their community when there is intense need? And do they do it through financial sponsorships or engagement, or both? To measure the level of independence, we ask, do they provide humanitarian action regardless of outside influences? The overall impact score is between 1 and 5. 1 means there is no acknowledgement of issues or concerns. 2, they have demonstrated that they have a public acknowledgement of an issue, but they haven't put any long-term action plan in motion. 3, they've developed and publicly stated what the plan is, and they're getting ready to make improvements. 4, they put those plans into action. 5, if they get a 5, that means that they're being very proactive and continuously working to improve their use of CSR. In my final CSR video, I was able to collaborate and really walk people through relevant government definitions and roles. In my final reflection brief, which I am currently concluding, this is an opportunity to look back at all of the different assignments that I've completed during this 9-week intense period. We also had quotes, and we utilize quotes weekly to help motivate ourselves and our fellow interns, and I'll share my quotes with you now. Some quotes that resonated. "The time is always right to do what is right," by Martin Luther King Jr. "Failure is not something to be ashamed of, nor is it proof of unworthiness. Failure is something to be powered by. When we live afraid to fail, we don't take risk. We don't bring our entire selves to the table. So we end up failing before we even begin. Let's stop worrying. What if I fail? Instead, let's promise ourselves, when I fail, I'll stick around." That's by USA soccer legend Abby Wambach. When one person stands up and says, "Wait a minute, this is wrong," it helps other people to do the same. That's by Gloria Steinem. People who are crazy enough to think they can change the world are the ones that do. That's by Rob Sittenman. I Never Lose, I Either Win or Learn by Nelson Mandela. There comes a time when one must take a position, nor politic nor popular, but he must take it because his conscience tells him it's the right thing to do. By Martin Luther King Jr. All life is an experiment. The more experiments you make, the better. By Randolph Waldo Emerson. And lastly, the price of success is hard work, dedication to the job at hand, and the determination that whether we win or lose, we have applied the best of ourselves to the task at hand. By Vince Lombardi. The special highlight of the My Impact project was the ability to contribute to civic education. The highlight of the My Impact brief assignment was that I was able to research and analyze various topics, and I was able to choose those topics. This kept me really excited about being able to research and dig deeper. I had the honor and privilege to interact with distinguished guests, and the highlights were various, such as the highlight for guest speaker, Lieutenant Governor Carroll. She provided advice on how to increase ethical behavior in the political arena. She provided solutions that impacted the transparency and governance, such as career staff should have the same ethical standards as elected officials. This can be done through term limits for all political staff and a permanent block from the political arena once they've completed their term. The highlight of distinguished guest Mayor Wood was his statement that local government is about developing a thriving community. It requires individuals to think and bring very practical solutions to help the daily lives of their citizens. The highlight of Commissioner Krepp was that her message was to use my positional authority to make a difference and reach out to my community and never be afraid to improve circumstances for my jurisdiction. If I see a solution, just go for it and use my power for good. The highlight for Senator Jeff Tart was that his encouragement was to communicate regardless of party lines. He reinforced that government officials don't bicker often, and in fact, they get along very well and they work to have great relationships. He suggested that we improve our networking skills and get involved in local government to make a big change in people's daily lives. Chief of Staff, Arts, highlights is that he encouraged networking, developing writing skills, and continuing to gain policy knowledge. And this can be gained through reading trusted publications, internships and fellowships. It's also important to know that what your congressional representatives' viewpoints are on bills in order to advocate for them at the drop of a hat, and push back confidently when challenged with incorrect information. Canadian diplomat Gisem Erez highlight was that she was able to provide her expert knowledge as she was involved in writing the bill, and more specifically the agriculture sections. This was a major opening up of the agriculture trade opportunities between all three countries. I valued the assignment to deeply research the topic prior to our meeting for the US MTA. Congressman Meeks, his highlight was his life philosophy of education along with healthy economic conditions creates an opportunity for empowerment. The highlight for his Chief of Staff, Sophia Lafargue's highlight was that it isn't enough to just be passionate about a topic. It's important that we educate ourselves and make sure that we know the ins and outs of issues, and also find out what the solutions are so when it's time for change and there's momentum, we're ready. Tombe, her highlight was that government is the biggest driver of CSR, and India has mastered CSR through focusing on environmental concerns, but they've had less success in gender equality, poverty, and health. She feels that a framework of CSR implementation needs accountability and transparency, and those are areas that the country of India can improve. Guest speaker, Beliapa, her highlight was that it's important to have sustainability along with investment that leads to profit. You need to know who the stakeholders are. What's important to those stakeholders? We must combine profit and purpose. My top 3 takeaways from my experience with MTA Visions are: 1, improve conciseness in my impact briefs, while still providing a thorough analysis. 2, the ability to use technology to facilitate staff meetings while I'm in the lead. 3, the ability to create, edit a professional video, and contribute to CSR literature. My next step is policy, social justice, or HR fellowship, preferably remote. I then plan to work as a legislative assistant, then as a policy analyst, with the goal of becoming a legislative director. I would recommend this program to social workers, as this is my background, and it allowed me to expand my skills of social work and learn how to improve communities in a different way, while increasing my research skills and doing it so in a way that I can do it practically and in meaningful ways. In the future, I hope to work with Representative Ro Khanna for his work in criminal justice reform and improving access to health care for Native American veterans. Stacey Abrams for her work in equal rights and voting rights. Representative Karen Bass for her work in criminal justice reform, such as identifying discriminatory criminal justice policies, focusing resources towards youth and community services, and fighting for re-entry services. Hakeem Jeffries for his work in criminal justice reform, and Ayanna Presley for her work in community health and gun violence prevention. My final quote is one that has fueled me throughout my internship and invited me to push myself without fear. I've mentioned it previously, but it's worth repeating. Failure is not something to be ashamed of, nor is it proof of unworthiness. Failure is something to be powered by. When we live afraid to fail, we don't take risks. We don't bring our entire selves to the table, so we end up failing before we even begin. Let's stop worrying. What if I fail? Instead, let's promise that when we fail, I'll stick around. Abby Wambach. I want to thank MTA Visions for choosing me as 1 out of 8 of 107. That was such an honor. Thank you to Ms. Adonis and Ms. Hughes and Mr. Metellus for your hands-on approach. You created an environment that let me know that it was okay to reach out and ask any questions that I had or if I needed guidance. Thank you to my fellow interns. You worked so hard and produced excellent work. It was a pleasure keeping the work standards high with you. This was an intensive internship in which I learned a lot, and I'm looking forward to applying what I've learned over the past 9 weeks. I hope to work with MTA Visions in the future, whether it's through a fellowship opportunity, direct employment, or through collaboration on the Hill.